Had seen beautiful places before, but Prime was something else entirely. The sky held 3 moons, and the plants shimmered with colors that Earth didn't have names for. They themselves were stunning, with skin that looked like living crystal catching the light of their purple sun. But hadn't survived 2 wars by being distracted by pretty scenery. Something was wrong here. The human diplomatic convoy had arrived 3 days ago, part of humanity's first big push into galactic society. Earth had only made contact with alien civilizations 6 months earlier, and everyone back home was excited about making friends among the stars, had volunteered for the mission because he was curious. After 20 years in the military, he figured meeting aliens would be more interesting than training recruits back on Mars. Now he was starting to wish he'd stayed home. Their guide, a young female named In, was showing them what the Dominion Collective called an agricultural facility. The translator device in his ear turned her musical language into flat English words. She spoke carefully, precisely, like someone who had memorized a script. Had seen prison camps before. He'd studied them in history classes and seen the aftermath in war zones. This place had all the signs. The high fences, the guards with weapons, the way the workers moved with their heads down, the way In's hands trembled when she pointed out the irrigation systems. The other humans in the diplomatic team seemed not to notice. They were scientists and politicians, smart people who had never been soldiers. They smiled and took notes and asked polite questions about crop yields. Watch the workers instead. They were thin, too thin. Their crystalline skin looked dull, like gems that hadn't been polished. None of them looked at the visitors. In one corner, a guard shoved an elderly who had stopped to rest. The old one fell hard and didn't get back up for a long moment. Something cold settled in his stomach. That evening, back at the compound where the humans were staying, he couldn't sleep. He sat outside under the 3 moons trying to sort out his thoughts. The Dominion Collective controlled this world. They'd been very clear about that in the briefings. Though we're a protectorate species under Dominion care, that was the official language. Had heard pretty words covering up ugly truths before. A sound made him turn. In stood at the edge of the compound, half hidden in shadow. She looked around nervously, then approached when she saw he was alone. "Sergeant," she said quietly. Her English was better than the translator made it sound. "I should not be here, but I need to know something." "What's that?" Kept his voice low to match hers. "On your world, Earth," she hesitated, "have your people ever been owned by others of your kind?" Felt that cold feeling in his stomach get worse. "Yeah," he said. "We have slavery, occupation, conquest. We've done it to each other more times than I can count." "And did the owned ones ever become free?" "Sometimes. Usually they had to fight for it." In's crystalline skin flickered with colors hadn't seen before. The translator had told him that were telepathic, that they could share emotions and thoughts with each other. Right now, she looked like she was struggling to hold something back. Then she met his eyes, and her control slipped. The wave of emotion hit like a physical force. Terror, grief, rage, desperation. The feelings weren't his, but for a moment he experienced them like they were. He saw flashes of memory that weren't his own. Children taken from parents, elders beaten for speaking the old language, generations living in fear. In gasped and stumbled back, her skin flashing with shame. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. We are taught to control ourselves. I'm sorry." Stood up slowly, his heart pounding. "How long?" he asked. "How long have your people been like this?" 73 years since the Dominion came. My grandmother remembers when we were free, most of us don't. Tears ran down her face and they glittered like liquid diamonds. We tried to resist in the beginning. The Dominion killed so many. Eventually, we stopped trying. What was the point? They are too strong, too many. We are just one small world. No one in the galaxy cares what happens to us. "I care," said, and was surprised to find he meant it absolutely. In laughed bitterly. "You are one human, your people are new here. The Dominion has hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships. What can one person do against an empire? Thought about history lessons from his childhood, about Warsaw and Budapest, about the Underground Railroad and the French resistance, about ordinary people who had decided that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible. Maybe more than you think, he said. Are there others like you, people who remember, people who still want to be free? The hope that flickered across his face was painful to see. It was so fragile, so desperate. A few, mostly young ones, the elders say we're foolish, that will only bring punishment down on everyone. They're probably right. Maybe, but you know what I learned in my wars, leaned forward. Empires look strong until someone pushes back. Then you find out they're not as solid as they pretend to be. You would help us, In whispered. Why, we're nothing to you. Your people need the Dominion's goodwill. If you help us, you risk everything. Thought about the old who had been shoved to the ground that afternoon. He thought about In's careful, scripted words during the tour. He thought about the way the workers had moved like ghosts through their own world. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And because if humanity's going to be part of this galaxy, we should stand for something better than looking the other way. Over the next 2 weeks, met with a small group of idealists in secret. There were 7 of them, young who had grown up in chains but refused to accept them. They met in abandoned buildings and deep tunnels, places the Dominion didn't bother to watch. Taught them everything he knew, how to move in secret, how to communicate without being traced, how to turn farming equipment into weapons, how to choose targets that would hurt the Dominion without getting civilians killed, how to build a resistance from nothing. The diplomatic mission went on above, oblivious, attended the official meetings and kept his mouth shut while the diplomats talked about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. At night, he became someone else. You move like this, he showed them, demonstrating how to disable a guard without killing. The point isn't to murder everyone. The point is to make them afraid, make them use resources, make them realize controlling you costs more than it's worth. One of the young, a male named, asked, "And what happens when they respond with violence, when they kill our people to punish us?" "Then you don't give in," said. "That's what they're counting on. They think you'll value peace more than freedom. You have to prove them wrong." They looked at each other. Their skin flickered with shared emotions couldn't read. "On Earth," In said slowly, "the people who fought for freedom, did they win?" "Not always, not right away. Sometimes it took generations. Sometimes they lost and kept losing until finally something changed." Met her eyes. "But the ones who never tried, they stayed slaves forever." The first operation was small. A labor camp on the outskirts of the capital city, where about 200 were held. And the resistance studied the patterns, learned the guard rotations, and found the weaknesses. The night they moved, felt the familiar cold clarity of combat settle over him. This was what he was good at, what he'd trained for his entire adult life. Just for once, he was using it for something that felt completely right. They cut the power first. In the darkness, led the team through the fence. The Dominion guards were overconfident and sloppy. They'd never dealt with real resistance before. Disabled 3 of them in silence before the alarm went up. Then it was chaos. The resistance fighters moved through the camp, breaking open doors and leading prisoners out. Covered them, his training making him faster and deadlier than the surprised guards. When one of the guards got off a shot that nearly hit In, put him down without hesitation. They got everyone out. All 200 prisoners disappeared into the tunnels beneath the city, guided by resistance members who knew every hidden path. Behind them, the camp burned. Stood within on a hill overlooking the city, watching the flames light up the night sky. In the distance, they could hear sirens and shouts. "They'll come looking for us now," In said. Her skin was glowing with colors had never seen before. Joy, terror, hope, fear, all mixed together. "Let them come," said. You've won something tonight, not your freedom, not yet, but something more important. What's that? You've remembered that you can fight back. Once you remember that, they can never make you forget again. In the city below, the first resistance in 30 years had just announced itself to the galaxy. And somewhere in the Dominion Command Center, alarms were going off that would change everything. The response from the Dominion Collective was swift and brutal. Within 3 days, orbital bombardment platforms appeared in prime sky, massive ships that could reduce cities to ash with a single command. The Dominion governor's message was broadcast on every channel, in every language. The terrorists who attacked our facility will surrender themselves immediately. The alien criminal will be turned over to Dominion justice. If this does not happen within 1 standard week, we will begin reducing your cities to rubble, 1 per day, until compliance is achieved. Watched the broadcast from a hidden bunker deep underground. Around him, the small resistance group sat in stunned silence. Through their telepathic connection, he could feel waves of despair radiating between them. "We have to surrender you," said finally, his voice hollow. "We have no choice, they'll kill millions." Nodded slowly. He'd known this would happen. Empires didn't play fair. They couldn't afford to. If they learned they could resist without massive retaliation, the whole system would collapse. "We'll turn ourselves in too," In said. "All of us, if it saves our people." No, his voice was firm. "That's not how this works." "What do you mean?" In's skin flickered with confusion. "We don't have a choice. If we don't give you to them, they'll murder our people. What else can we do?" Had been thinking about this since the moment he'd seen those ships appear in the sky. He'd fought in wars and studied history and learned one thing that most people never understood. Sometimes the way you lose is more important than whether you win. "There's always a choice," he said. "You can give them what they want and go back to being slaves, or you can give them something they don't expect." His personal communicator had been buzzing constantly. Messages from Earth, from the diplomatic corps, from his commanding officers, all saying the same thing: surrender, turn yourself in. Don't start a war humanity can't win. Think about Earth. Think about the consequences. Deleted them all without reading past the first line. That night he recorded a message, not to the Dominion but to everyone else. He hacked into the Resistance's communication network and broadcast it as widely as possible to every planet and station within range. The helped, their surprising skill with technology routing the signal through dozens of relays. Sat in front of a simple camera and spoke. "My name is, I'm a human from Earth. 3 weeks ago I came to Prime and learned that the people here aren't a protectorate. They're slaves. I've seen prison camps. I've seen children taken from parents. I've seen elders beaten for speaking their own language, and I decided to help them fight back." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Now the Dominion Collective wants me to surrender or they'll start killing civilians. They think this will make me stop. They think it will make the give up. They're wrong about both things." Leaned forward. "I'm going to surrender myself to the Dominion, but not because they threaten to kill innocents. I'm doing it for a different reason. I'm doing it so that every species in the galaxy can see what happens when you stand up to oppression. So they can see that some things are worth dying for. So they can see that one person standing for what's right can matter." He looked directly into the camera. I want to say this. Your lives matter. Your freedom matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. I'm one human who barely knows you, and I think you're worth dying for. I think your freedom is worth my life. Remember that when they try to make you feel worthless again." He took a breath. "To every other species living under Dominion control, I say this. You're not alone. You're not helpless. Change is possible. Freedom is possible. Someone has to be first. Someone has to show that the Empire isn't invincible. I guess that someone is me." Smiled slightly. "And to the Dominion Collective, I have one message. You can kill me, but you can't kill what I represent. You can't kill hope. Every species watching this will remember that one human chose to die for alien freedom. They'll ask themselves why, and some of them will find an answer you're not going to like. He ended the recording. The message spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been picked up by news networks on dozens of worlds. The Dominion tried to suppress it, but the damage was done. On occupied planets across their empire, people watched a human sergeant explain why their freedom was worth his life. On Earth, there was chaos. The government didn't know what to do. Some people called a hero. Others called him a traitor who would get humanity destroyed. The diplomatic corps was in emergency sessions, trying to figure out how to distance Earth from his actions. Ignored all of it. He had 1 week before the Dominion started killing civilians. He spent it teaching the Resistance everything else he knew. Every trick, every tactic, every lesson he'd learned in 20 years of military service. "Don't let this die," he told in on the last night. "Don't let my death be for nothing." "It won't be," she promised, her skin glowing with determination and grief mixed together. "We'll keep fighting, I swear it." "Good," managed a smile. "You're going to win, you know. Maybe not this year or next year, but eventually. The Dominion is going to learn that you can't keep people in chains forever." In touched his face gently, a gesture of deep respect in her culture. "Thank you, my people will never forget you." On the 7th day, walked out of the bunker alone. He wore his military uniform, pressed and clean. No weapons, no armor, just a human sergeant walking calmly toward the Dominion garrison in the capital city. Crowds lined the streets, came out of their homes to watch him pass. Their skin flickered with colors had learned to read: grief, gratitude, wonder, hope. Commander, the Dominion officer in charge of Prime, met him at the garrison gates. The commander was a tall species with 4 arms and cold eyes that looked like chips of ice. "You're the terrorist?" asked. He said, "and I'm here to accept the consequences of helping people fight for their freedom." "You're a fool. Do you really think your death will change anything? This little rebellion will be crushed and will learn their place again." Smiled, maybe. Or maybe you've just created the spark that's going to burn your whole empire down. I guess we'll find out. The trial was a formality. The Dominion had already decided the outcome, was found guilty of terrorism, insurrection, and crimes against the Dominion collective. The sentence was death by firing squad, to be carried out immediately and broadcast across occupied worlds as a warning. They took him to a public square in the capital. Thousands were forced to attend, herded in by guards to witness what happened to rebels. The Dominion wanted them to see die, wanted them to feel hopeless. Stood before the firing squad unbound. The Dominion wanted to show that he'd surrendered willingly, that he'd given up. They didn't understand that walking to your death by choice and being dragged, there were completely different things. Commander read the charges and the sentence, barely listened. He was looking at the crowd instead, at all the faces watching him. He could see in the crowd, her skin pale with contained emotion. He gave her a small nod. "Any last words?" asked, his tone making it clear he didn't care. Thought about everything he wanted to say, about freedom and dignity and the price of liberty. But in the end, he kept it simple. He spoke in, words had taught him weeks ago. "Your chains are only as strong as your belief in them." The firing squad raised their weapons, stood straight, chin up, meeting his death the way he tried to live, without fear, without regret. The shots rang out across the square. Human sergeant fell and didn't rise again. In the crowd, felt the telepathic web of her people vibrate with emotion. Every present felt it, and through them it spread across their world. Not despair, like the Dominion expected. Something else entirely. Something that felt like the moment before lightning strikes, like the breath before the storm. Hope. 3 standard months after his execution, the Resistance struck the Dominion garrison during a shift change. They destroyed the Orbital Bombardment Control Center and killed Commander. The uprising spread across the planet in hours. 6 months later, another occupied world called Minor rose up, then another, then 3 more in the same week. The Dominion Collective, which had maintained stable control over hundreds of worlds for centuries, suddenly found itself fighting 17 simultaneous rebellions. Species that had never worked together before were coordinating attacks. Tactics that looked suspiciously like human military doctrine were appearing on worlds humanity had never visited. His final message kept spreading and rebroadcast on underground networks across the galaxy. The Dominion tried to suppress it, but that only made it more popular. On occupied planets, his words became a rallying cry. Your chains are only as strong as your belief in them. The human diplomatic corps was in a panic. Earth was too new, too weak to be in the middle of a galactic conflict. But they found themselves with unexpected allies. Species who remembered that a human had died for alien freedom reached out in secret. Trade agreements, technology exchanges, mutual defense pacts. We support you because of, one ambassador told Earth's representatives. He showed us what humanity values. That's worth more than any trade deal. On Prime, it had become the leader of the resistance. She learned fast, turning lessons into a sophisticated guerrilla campaign. The Dominion poured troops into the planet, but for every resistance fighter they killed, 2 more rose up. The war was brutal. The Dominion wasn't going to give up easily. Cities burned. Civilians died. But something had fundamentally changed. The occupied species weren't fighting alone anymore. They were coordinating, sharing information, learning from each other's victories and defeats. A network formed, species helping other species across the Dominion's territory. Humans, despite Earth's official policy of neutrality, kept finding themselves involved. Former military personnel volunteering as advisors, smugglers running weapons to resistance groups, engineers teaching occupied species how to build shields and weapons from industrial equipment. Earth's government finally gave up trying to stay neutral. They couldn't control individual humans who wanted to help, and honestly, most people on Earth supported them. Had become a hero back home, his face on murals and monuments. His message, some things are worth dying for, even when it's not your freedom, became part of human culture. 2 years after his death, the Dominion Collective was forced to the negotiating table. They hadn't been defeated militarily, but the cost of maintaining their empire had become unsustainable. The occupations that once required minimal resources now required constant military presence. Dozens of worlds were in open rebellion. The economy was collapsing under the strain. The Treaty of Nexus Station granted independence to 43 formerly occupied worlds. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The Dominion remained a powerful force in the galaxy, but they'd learned a hard lesson. Some people would rather die than stay enslaved, and that made them impossible to control cheaply. Prime was among the liberated worlds. 3 years and 4 months after walked into that firing squad, and stood in the capital square and declared her planet free. Tears ran down her crystalline face as she spoke to the crowd. We paid a terrible price for this moment. Thousands of our people died in this war, but we're free, and we owe it to the human who showed us that freedom was possible. She unveiled a monument in the square where had been executed, a simple statue of a human in military uniform, hand extended in friendship. At the base, words in both and English. He died so others could be free. The freed worlds formed the Coalition for Sovereign Species, a loose alliance dedicated to preventing future occupations. Their first action was to establish an award for extraordinary sacrifice in the cause of another species' freedom. The debate about what to call it lasted about 5 minutes. Everyone agreed immediately. The Sacrifice Award. The first recipient was himself, posthumously. and accepted it on his behalf in a ceremony attended by representatives from 80 different species. She spoke about the human who had taught her people to fight, who had chosen death over watching others suffer. In my culture, she said, we believe that the dead remain with us through our actions. Every time we fight for justice, lives again. Every time we help another species in need, he lives again. Every time we choose freedom over safety, he lives again. She held up the award, a crystal sculpture that caught the light and split it into 1,000 colors. This award will be given to those who embody what showed us. That species boundaries don't matter when it comes to justice. That one person, acting with courage, can change the galaxy. That some things are worth dying for, even when the cause isn't your own. Over the next decades, 9 more sentients received the Sacrifice Award. A who died protecting human colonists from raiders. A who exposed a corruption scandal that toppled a government. An Earth diplomat who refused to abandon refugees during a planetary evacuation. Each one demonstrated the principle had died for, that doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing. 30 years after his execution, In traveled to Earth. She was old now by standards. Her crystalline skin had dimmed with age and she moved carefully, but she insisted on making the journey herself. The town where had grown up was small, farming country in what used to be called Montana. They'd built a memorial park there, funded by grateful species from across the galaxy. The centerpiece was a statue of, not in military dress but in civilian clothes, smiling, young, the way his family remembered him. In stood before the statue for a long time, not speaking. Around the base were thousands of small crystals, brought from dozens of worlds by visitors who wanted to honor his memory. Each one was a story, a species that had been freed or helped or saved because had shown them that one person could make a difference. Human children played in the park, running and laughing, unaware of the significance of the place, and watched them and felt something like peace. A human woman approached, old herself with white hair and kind eyes. "You're in," she said, not a question. "I am and you are." "Sarah's sister." The 2 old women looked at each other, separated by species and culture, but connected by the memory of a man who had changed everything. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, "for coming all this way, for remembering him." "How could we forget?" In skin flickered with colors that transcended language. "Your brother gave us everything, our freedom, our dignity, our future. Every day that the live free is because of." "He always did have a strong sense of right and wrong," Sarah said with a sad smile. "Even as a kid. Drove our parents crazy sometimes, the way he'd defend anyone he thought was being treated unfairly." And reached into a bag she carried and pulled out a small crystal, perfectly carved. "This is from Prime, from the Resistance Memorial. I wanted you to have it." Sarah took it carefully. Inside the crystal, preserved somehow in the structure itself, was an image, standing with a group of young, all of them smiling. The first resistance meeting, captured by someone with a camera they thought was broken. "He's smiling," Sarah whispered. "He smiled a lot in those weeks before the end. He said he'd finally found something worth doing with his life." And paused. "He spoke of Earth sometimes, of his family. He missed you all." "Not enough to come home." "No, not enough for that." And looked back at the statue. "Your brother understood something that most people never learn, that a life spent only protecting yourself isn't really living, that sometimes you have to risk everything for others or nothing means anything." They stood together in silence, 2 old women remembering a soldier who had become a symbol. Around them, children played and birds sang and life went on, the way it always does. "The award ceremony is next week," Sarah said finally, "for the 11th recipient, a human woman who died protecting a colony from a disease outbreak. Would you speak at it?" "Of course, it would be an honor." "Good, because I think people need to remember why the award exists. Not just to honor the dead, but to remind the living what's worth fighting for. In placed her hand on the statue's base, a gesture of respect in her culture. Through her touch, she sent out a telepathic pulse, knowing no one could receive it but needing to send it anyway. We're still fighting, still free, still remembering. The galaxy is better because you lived, and because you showed us that freedom is worth any price. The crystal at the statue's base caught the sunlight and split it into colors that didn't have names in any human language. In the park, children laughed and played, growing up in a galaxy where humans were known not for conquest or greed, but for sacrifice, for standing up when it mattered, for proving that one person, acting with courage, could change everything. The Sacrifice Award would be given out for generations to come, a reminder that species boundaries didn't matter when it came to justice, that doing right mattered more than doing what was easy or safe or convenient. And somewhere, in the vast sweep of galactic history, a human sergeant who had lived 37 years and changed the course of civilizations rested in peace, knowing his death had meant something. That some things really were worth dying for, even when they weren't your own.